Sit back and listen to this extremely interesting story. Chapter 3. Sandy is away on a business trip. When I woke up, I noticed Sandy had already been up, making coffee and breakfast. I started getting ready for work and ran down the steps where Sandy was having breakfast in the kitchen. I fixed my plate with some scrambled eggs and sausage, poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down. After breakfast, I finished getting ready while watching Sandy get dressed. She sat in a chair in front of the dressing table and slid her high, waisted nylon pants down to her pretty legs. She wore a white blouse and a gray skirt. I went downstairs to have a cup of coffee. As Sandy walked down the stairs, I couldn't help but think how beautiful she looked. The skirt was just above the knee and looked very professional. Her top was very transparent. She wore a jacket over the blouse. On her ankle was a thin gold chain with a beautiful wife charm dangling from it. The car pulled into the driveway and honked its horn. Sandy kissed me and told me she loved me. She took her briefcase and rolled the suitcase to the car. From this point on, the story will be told from Sandy's perspective. Sandy arrived in Denver with her co-worker Diane. They were met at the airport by a company courtesy car like the one that picked them up at home that morning. The driver's name was Terry, and he helped them load their luggage into the trunk. He informed Sandy and Diane that he would be driving them to their hotel to check in and get settled into their rooms. It was 10:30 a.m., and he would pick them both back up from the hotel after lunch at 12:30 to drive them to the office. We checked into our rooms, and I started to hang up some of my clothes. The room phone rang, and I wondered who would be calling already. It was John. "Hi Sandy, hope you had a nice flight, and I just wanted to check and make sure everything is satisfactory," he said. I replied, "Everything is fine, John. I'm going to grab Diane and have some lunch before Terry comes back for us." "Well, you and Diane will be shown to my office when you arrive, and I will get you both started. See you then, Sandy," he said. Before I could get back to unpacking, there was a knock on the door. It was Diane. "They have a nice restaurant off of the lobby," she said. "That works for me," I replied. As we passed the lobby, I noticed the lounge right off of the indoor pool. "I'm sure I'll be ready for a cocktail after work tonight," I thought. After lunch, we still had 30 minutes, so Diane and I ordered some coffee and talked about the firm. We had talked a few times at the office, but didn't know each other real well. Diane is an attractive 33-year-old with 3 children. Her husband is a doctor, and she said she isn't bothered by travel for work. She doesn't see much of her husband anyway, and they have a nanny to watch the children. Soon Terry arrived, and the girls were headed to the office. Sandy and Diane arrived at the headquarters building and took the elevator to the top-floor penthouse suite. The receptionist came up and greeted them, saying, "Good to see you again," to Diane, and "Nice to meet you," to Sandy. "John has been expecting you, so please have a seat, and he should be ready for you in a few minutes." John opened the door to his office and invited Sandy and Diane to join him. Sandy was amazed at John's big, extravagant office. Back home, he wasn't in a cubicle, but his office was nothing like this. "How about we sit at the conference table? We have a couple of more people coming, and they should be up shortly," he said. John asked them if they would like anything to drink, and Diane asked for a cup of coffee. Sandy looked at John, feeling a little overwhelmed by the change, tailored suit and fancy office. She asked if it was possible to get an iced tea. John disappeared through a doorway and returned with the drinks. He gave Sandy a nudge and told her if she needed anything else, there was a fully stocked kitchen area off of his office through the door. Sandy smiled at John and said, "Looks like you have been doing well since your transfer here. There's been some drastic changes taking place in the corporation starting last week. We will talk later," John replied. The intercom started beeping, and John was informed that Ralph and Tom had arrived. John asked for the receptionist to show them to the conference table in his office. The young, attractive receptionist escorted the men to the table, and they were seated. John introduced everyone. Ralph was the accounting manager, and Tom was the senior accounting manager. Sandy felt confused. She knew that John's promotion when he transferred was to be the senior accounting manager at the Denver headquarters. After explaining what the auditing was about, he explained that Diane will be working under Ralph and that I would be assisting John with the final results. A few minutes later, they had all headed for their work areas as I remained in John's office. He took my left hand and helped me from my chair. He guided me into the main part of his office, where he had his desk along with another desk and computer in front of and to the right of his desk. "This will be your desk while you are here. The computer is on the network, and you can access your mail and desktop from here," he said. I walked over to his desk and took one of his business cards from the holder and read aloud. John, a manly vice president of operations. Very impressive, Johnny. And when is the rest of the firm going to get this information? John explained that the move took place on Monday, and that when he was transferred, even he didn't know that the firm planned to replace the vice president of the company, and it would be him. Sandy walked over to her desk and signed onto the computer. She wanted to access her email to see if there was any inside gossip about his becoming VP. John's receptionist beeped his intercom to tell him he had a call from the CEO, Carlos Santiago. As I was checking my mail, I looked over at John, who was talking business on the phone. I noticed that he was checking me out. He had my desk placed so that he would be able to get a complete side profile of me any time he wanted to look over. I swiveled the chair around to face him and crossed my legs. John smiled at me and finished his conversation on the phone. Well, Johnny, I hate to break the news to you, but I have a string of emails here from some good sources saying that you have been appointed as VP of Operations, and that the announcement would be made as early as tomorrow. John noticed the black high heels and ankle bracelet and admired the shape of Sandy's legs. She could see the look in his eyes as he worked his way to her knees. Sandy let her skirt ride up a bit as she sat down at her desk. Noticing that John was watching, she lowered the hem to about 4 inches above her knee, as far as it would go while sitting on a chair. She turned the chair back to face her desk and continued reading her mail. John continued to look at Sandy as she took off her jacket, and John admired her sheer white blouse. He looked at the wedding ring on her finger, which made him want to be with her even more. John thought about how embarrassing it was to be with someone else's wife, and he knew that soon Sandy would submit to him. Sandy could feel John looking at her. She looked over at him and smiled. She admired his success, but also his youth and handsome appearance. What she really found attractive was his large muscular frame. She had many times wondered what it would be like to be with a really large and physically fit man like John. She also knew that he was the reason she was here at the headquarters in Denver. Sandy wondered if she was going to make it through the next few days without cheating on Alex. She thought about their conversation that night. Maybe I will have to call him and ask if I can have John for a sleepover, she thought to herself. John caught Sandy's gaze and she quickly turned back to her computer. She was trying to hold back a smile. Sandy, why don't you let me entertain you tonight? I could show you around Denver, or we could go for a swim in my pool and grill on the patio, he said. He added, it will fun. We could catch up on what everyone back home is doing. Sandy asked, and are you going to promise to behave like a gentleman and treat me like a respectable married lady? Sandy then added, no, I don't think you will, John. You've said some things to me in the past that lead me to believe you want more. It was quiet for a minute, and then John replied, I'd really like to spend some time with you. We've always gotten along well, and I enjoy being with you, and you're right. I'm dying to be close to you. Sandy told John that she thought it would be best if she just returns to the hotel after work. She said after dinner she was planning to go for a swim and have a couple of cocktails before turning in early. John asked her if he could drive her back to the hotel, and she replied, thanks, John. I'm sure Diane would like that very much. John said, you're being a tease and you know it. Sandy replied, good things are worth waiting for, don't you agree? After work, John escorted Diane and Sandy to the parking garage, and they climbed into his new Mustang GT. Sandy sat in the back seat to let Diane sit up front. John thought this is just part of her game, playing hard to get. When they arrived at the hotel, John dropped off the ladies and drove off. Sandy asked Diane if she wanted to have a drink at the lounge, and Diane agreed. As they had their drinks, Sandy asked Diane if she wanted to have dinner at the same place they had lunch. Diane asked Sandy, can I trust you not to spread any rumors around work about me? Sandy replied, surely you know me well enough that I don't talk about people behind their backs. You can trust me if you like. Diane continued, you know I love my husband and kids, so I would die if this ever got back to anyone who knows us back home, but I do trust you. Sandy answered, go ahead, Diane. If there is something I can help you with, I will do what I can. Diane gave Sandy a devilish smile and said, it's nothing like that. You see, I have been coming here to do audits now for 5 years, and during that time Ralph and I have developed a close relationship, if you know what I mean. So I hope you don't mind, but I will be having company in my room tonight. Sandy reassured Diane that her secret was safe, and she wouldn't disturb her this evening. Diane thanked her and said that Ralph was picking her up in an hour to take her out to dinner, and she hoped Sandy wouldn't mind dining alone. Sandy told her she didn't mind at all and to enjoy her evening. After Diane went to her room to change, Sandy ordered another drink. Wow, she couldn't believe Diane was cheating on her husband with this Ralph. Sandy had met Diane's husband before and thought he was a much better catch than what she had seen of Ralph. Sandy finished her drink and went to her room to change into her swimsuit. Subscribe to our channel so that your second C gaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.